Hey everyone, Wolvis here. In this video I want to talk about the Mig-21 MF, because the Mig-21 MF is one of those few vehicles in War Thunder that I genuinely, truly, really enjoy. In case you don't know, the Mig-21 MF is a rank 7 vehicle that sits in the German tech tree. It has a battle rating of 10.3, and quite honestly, perhaps that is a little bit too low for this aircraft. And the reason I say that is simply, around 10.3 there's plenty of aircraft that either get a good engine, a good airframe, or a good set of weapons. In fact, there's plenty of aircraft around this BR that get access to 2 out of those 3 things. However, there's only a handful of vehicles at battle rating 10.3 that have access to all 3 of these things. And well, guess what? The MiG-21 is one of those few vehicles that has access to the holy trinity of air-to-air combat performance. And what's truly unique about the MiG-21 MF is that it feels like this aircraft is something greater than the sum of its parts. In essence, this aircraft not only has a good engine, a good airframe, and good missiles, but it has 3 of these things that work together very well in the sense that they almost strengthen each other's abilities. To give you the TLDR, the MiG-21 MF is an extremely agile fighter. It has a very good turn time, very good nose authority, it rolls very fast, it is overall a very mobile aircraft. However, it does have one fatal flaw. You see those funny Dorito-shaped wings? Yeah, well, as a result, this aircraft loses speed incredibly quickly if you do anything that even remotely resembles a turn. Although, to be entirely honest, calling this a fatal flaw is perhaps a little bit unfair, because it can also be a very big strength. Being able to dump your energy very quickly can be very beneficial if you're trying to make the enemy overshoot, for example. And remember how I said that this aircraft is greater than the sum of its parts? Well, this is where that comes in. The power plant in this aircraft is absolutely bonkers. Given some specific conditions, this aircraft has a thrust-to-weight ratio greater than 1. So although this aircraft may lose speed very quickly when it turns, it also regains its speed very quickly afterwards when you accelerate. Later on in the video, I'll show you how to use both the speed bleed and the thrust-to-weight ratio to your advantage, but first I want to talk about one more thing, and that's the weapons that this aircraft gets. The MiG-21 at 10.3 gets to carry 4 R60s, as well as an internal cannon. Now I don't have a lot to say about these guns other than they are fairly hard to aim, but then if you do aim and you do actually manage to hit the enemy, they are extremely hard hitting. You can completely eviscerate an entire aircraft in just a couple of shots. However, the real star of the show here is the R60. Again, this aircraft gets to carry 4 of these missiles, and quite honestly, it's the perfect missile for this aircraft. And I say that because in my opinion, the R60 is effectively the best dogfight IR missile in the game. Not only are these bad boys capable of pulling 30 Gs, they'll pull 30 Gs right off the rails. That, paired with the fact that the IR Seeker in these missiles is willing to lock onto literally anything that's mildly hot, and you've got yourself a missile that is extremely willing to just immediately eviscerate an enemy at close range. However, that doesn't mean that the R60 is an absolutely perfect missile. For one, firing this missile from anywhere outside of 2 kilometers is very unreliable, and 2, yes, this missile is very good at locking onto enemies. It's also very good at locking onto flares, so if the enemy does see you and does flare it, it's very likely not going to track. That is, unless you are within a couple hundred meters directly behind the enemy aircraft. In that case, your missile is almost 100% guaranteed to hit. Okay, so to quickly recap, the MiG-21 MF is a absolutely beautiful aircraft because not only does it get a good engine, it also gets a good airframe as well as good missiles. And all these 3 things are not only good in their own regard, but they also help improve other aspects of the aircraft. And as a result, this plane is extremely capable. And to showcase this even more, I've collected a couple of clips which I can use to elaborate on how I personally like to fly the MiG-21 MF. The gameplay you're seeing in the background is basically me playing the MiG-21 MF, and I've been put into a down tier. It's basically a slight down tier to 9.7, and because I'm fighting the US, that means that my team has 9.7s and the US teams is basically exclusively 10.0 and 10.3 aircraft. Most of which are premiums, by the way. So, as you can see, I positioned myself virtually above where I expected the A-10s to be, and as you can tell, there is A-10s. I see an A-10 here, I fire at him because I assume he doesn't see me, and yep, it turns out I'm right. The R60 immediately pulls for his heat. Look around a bit, make sure I'm not going to get missiled by another A-10. As you can see from below me, that was probably a good thing because I flared his 9L. And now I go up a bit, I utilize the extreme power from my engine, and I try to pick which target I go for next, all the while looking around, making sure I'm not about to get missiled myself. Now I swoop back around for this A10 below me, but I notice that he starts to flare a lot, so I pull off, and then I also notice this F4C that just went mock right next to me. I'm going to fire a pot shot R60 at him. I don't expect it to hit, it's way too far away, but you know, I might as well try. It's a flareless plane, and if it hits, it hits. I then go for this A10, as you can see the first R60 missed, and then like a true A10 player, this guy tries to flare my bullets. Now, I have never heard of heat-seeking bullets, but apparently A10 players have, but in this case, his flares did not work against my gun. Too bad, bozo. Then I see this F5, try to go for him, but my 9 years of experience kick in and I look behind me, only to notice that there's 2 enemy aircraft trying to follow. Now, instead of following the other F5 here and basically dumping all my speed in a turn, I decide, you know what, let's just extend and swoop around later so I can properly pick out a target. And that's what I end up doing. I end up finding that this T2 here on the right is going to be my next victim. Why? Well, because I'm fairly low on fuel. I'm running on 7 minutes, and 7 minutes certainly isn't nothing, but I also know that within a relatively short amount of time, I'm going to need to run back to base. So I decide, you know what, I'm just going to chase down this flareless T2 and I will missile him with my last R60. Now, the reason I only have 6 minutes of fuel left is simply because I only run 20 minutes of fuel in this aircraft to begin with. I know there's plenty of people who will say that you need to run 30 minutes of fuel in the MiG-21 MF / the SMT, but personally, if I really want to last longer whilst flying this plane, I just turn off my afterburner. It's still plenty fast without the afterburner engaged, and if I really need to accelerate, then I just turn on the afterburner. Remember, this thing has absolutely bonkers thrust to weight ratio, so if you need to go fast, you might as well just start burning when you need it at that right exact moment. Now you join me here again right behind this T2, fire an R60 at him, he of course doesn't have flares, and of course it's only a critical hit. Luckily though, he's very slow, I managed to finish him off with my guns, and of course the guns do much more reliable damage than the R60s do. You might be able to get away from my R60 buddy, but my guns will most certainly tear right through your airframe. And now I'm on 3 minutes of fuel, and I have to start going back to base. And uh-oh, there's an F5 coming after me. And that is very much not good, because I genuinely do not have the capacity anymore to start dogfighting people. So I just point my nose straight back towards the airfield, and I start praying to God that my teammates will take care of the F5. Now they don't really, in fact he launches a missile at me right here, but luckily the tornado swoops in and scares away the F5 at least for long enough for me to run back to base, whilst in the meantime the SU-25 in front of me takes out the incoming A-10. So I get to easily cruise back to base without any further issues. However, it would have probably been a good idea in this particular match to carry slightly more fuel, because in this exact situation, well, there's a bit of a problem. Behind me you'll see an SU-25. The SU-25 is rather slow. He's being chased by an F5C. The F5C is certainly a lot faster, and as you can see, the SU-25 immediately starts screaming for help. And sadly, I have to tell him, sorry buddy, I can't, I have no fuel. And it's okay though, there's another tornado right next to me, he can probably help out the SU-25, right? No, he has no ammo. So sadly, we have to sit back and watch this SU-25 die to this F5C. Sorry buddy, I hope you have a better match next game. Back in the present though, and we have a bit of a problem now. Well, it's not exactly a problem, but basically this has evolved into a late game match with a 2v2 scenario. Now I'm a MiG-21 MF, I know I'm fighting at least one F5C. I don't remember what exactly the last aircraft is that I haven't spotted yet on the enemy team, but I do know that my one friendly is a tornado. And I also know that the tornado is not exactly a good dogfighter. So I'm a little bit skeptical that I'm going to be able to easily pull through this with the help of this other guy. In fact, I'm already thinking here that I'm going to start to have to carry the match. Now don't worry, that ends up being very true, but not for the reason that you think. As you can see, we both pull off some absolutely fabulous, realistic landings here. They're totally realistic, nothing weird about this. Sim players would absolutely not be appalled by this. But in any case, I managed to touch down safely with 2 minutes of fuel remaining, and I start to repair and rearm my aircraft immediately. Tornado, though, not so much. His name is now going down, which means he's overshot the runway, and uh-oh, wouldn't you know it, he crashed. So somehow this 2v2 has just evolved into a 2v1, which is me versus a F5C and some kind of mystery aircraft. Luckily though, as soon as I respawn here, you'll see that I get a singular blip on my radar before I turn it off, and that tells me that there is some enemy right in front of me at about something like 20 kilometers. That means that at least one guy can't be right above my airfield. which is good, I guess. I immediately start taking off. Of course, it happens very quickly in this aircraft. It has very good acceleration, but regardless, I'm still a bit scared that there might be an enemy waiting for me right above my airfield. In any case, I decide to quickly activate a AAA order so that the enemy can't activate either a Blind Hunt or an Avenger, which basically blocks them from trying to snipe my position on the map. And then for some reason, one of the last remaining enemies gets spotted right on the middle of the map. I don't know why this happened, but it did help me out a ton. And then also something I noticed on the scoreboard is that the last enemy at the top of their scoreboard is currently bailed out. That means they're probably on their airfield trying to reset their weapon loadout, or at least change their weapon loadout. In any case, they are not going to be in the air for a little while. And that means that this one guy right in front of me is currently trying to engage me in a 1v1 that I know I can probably win. So I start rushing towards him, and in order to get an energy advantage, I decide to climb for a bit. I know that I'm a much better climbing vehicle, so I will just ascend to a little bit above him. Regardless though, even though I zoom right over his head, he decides to climb up right after me, and he starts getting remarkably close here to my 6. This is quite honestly a terrible position for me to be in. He's 1 kilometer away, he starts to try to missile me. For some reason he launches both his missiles at me right at the same time, but I guess that's just good for me in the long run, because it means he can't try to missile me later on. As a result, this is now effectively a gunfight for him, and I know that, and he knows that, and I also am going to perfectly abuse that. In the beginning here you can see that I'm trying to kind of run away from him and extend, and that's simply because I'm trying to consider my options. I notice that I'm running towards my airfield here, and I really don't want to lose this 1v1 to a stupid Roland, so instead I try to turn back around and I zoom back down a bit. Now in doing so, of course, I lose a ton of speed, and the F5C manages to catch up fairly quickly. Lose my control here, and as a result the F5C is going to be able to pull in and get some very close cannon shots off of me. Honestly, he should have hit these. This match should have been over right there, but I get extremely lucky and he does not hit any of his shots. Now, what has this guy done? He's pulled up into a vertical right after a MiG-21, and he's stalled himself out. What does this mean? I get a massive advantage here. However, I decide to not immediately take advantage of that, and I pull down instead to get a bit more speed. Why? Because I myself was also completely stalled out, and I was actually at the bottom of the stall, which would have been arguably a little bit worse than his position. So again, I extend, and my plan now is to make him overshoot and then go into a slight vertical. Why? Because in a slight vertical, he's going to lose energy quite quickly because, you know, gravity, and that's going to benefit me because I can use my absolutely bonkers thrust-to-weight ratio to keep up with him regardless. There you go, he overshoots, and now I get to sit on his 6 without really having to do much at all. This guy decides to fully commit to the vertical. That's only good for me. Again, I have very good vertical flight performance. The F5C does not really, and as a result, he is going to perish here to my guns. I try to R60 him just to be sure that he dies, but luckily whilst I dive away from him, I see that he is basically dead anyway. I took off his tail, and he's not going to be pulling out of that spin at all. And now, there is a interesting situation, because I don't really know where the last guy is, except I do, because you see that base right in front of me? That's being damaged, and that's probably being damaged by napalm from the other F5, that is the last F5 remaining, dropping bombs on it. Of course I don't see him, except, oh wait, what's that there to the right? You see the Mach cone right now to the right of the base? Yep, he's about to get spotted. That is the last remaining enemy. Now I have a bit of a problem. I'm on 8 minutes of fuel, and as you know, this aircraft does burn quite quickly through such a fuel load, so I'm not too happy about this engagement, but regardless, I'm going to try to make the best of it. Now that was again a really terrible position to be in, but luckily this F5 completely misses all of his cannon shots. And this is the moment where I think, you know what, I might as well start spamming R60s at this guy. Even if they don't hit, they give me a good chance of, for one, lightening my airframe, and two, they might increase the chance of him dying before I run out of fuel. Sadly though, he flares both of them, but regardless, he's now completely stalled out in a position right above me, and I managed to snipe him with 11 cannon shells. There you go, that's the end of the match, and that's how I managed to get an ace in the Mig-21 MF. Now I want to point out, of course, I did select this footage specifically because it was a very fun and very good match to show off, but trust me, I've been having a lot of these matches lately, and I think you will probably too. If you don't have the MiG-21 MF, but you do have the MiG-21 SMT, then remember that both of these aircraft are virtually identical. And honestly, guys, I really invite you to play the MiG-21 MF and the SMT because they're just so much fun currently. In any case, let me know in the comments what plane I should talk about next, and goodbye.